Welcome to Wired to Hunt's Rut Fresh Radio, bringing you the latest reports from the Whitetail Woods. Presented by First Light, creating proven, versatile hunting apparel for the stand, saddle, or blind. First Light. Go farther, stay longer. And now, your hosts, KC Smith and Tyler Jones.
Welcome to Rut Fresh Radio. I'm your host, KC Smith, and it is full-fledged December right now, guys. That means late season patterns and all the good, cold stuff that comes with that. But there is still opportunity to kill the buck of your lifetime. This is Rut Fresh. Let's go. What is happening, all my woods people? This is Rut Fresh Radio, brought to you by First Light Gear, and I've got my favorite just First Light apparel wearer on the phone right now, Tyler Jones. What are you doing?
Oh, yeah, in Oklahoma, trying hard, but it ain't happening, boy.
Man, let me just ask you a general question, because we're going to get into some rut freshness here in a bit. But does it work to try harder in deer hunting, Tyler?
It can. It can.
Good answer.
In fact, it usually does if you just say try harder. If you're talking about going in further, it's not always that way. No. Gotcha.
And that's something you're experiencing at the moment?
Yeah. Goodness, dude. I hunted last night a mile and a half, like straight line. There's no telling how much I actually walked, because I went further than that in and found out there wasn't a tree. According to the aerial, there was, but there wasn't a tree when I got in there. So since the grass is, 17, 18 foot, I decided to not hang out there too long. Went and got in a tree, actually near some ag, and had 3 does and a spike come out within bow range of me. I picked the right tree. I just didn't see the buck I wanted. So I don't know. I may try to get in further and deeper into the nasty, nasty grass that is the Plains states this year after all the timely rain they had.
Good golly, man. That's, it's like rich people problems, like we all complain about the drought, and then we have this year, which we'll find out later from some of our guests, that the drought, there is some drought in the country, but the Plains got a lot of rain, and with that comes a ton of cover.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens when you get rain in June, but I don't think it's rained a whole lot since.
Yeah.
Because I'm seeing the same thing. It's pretty. They had some snow and rain last week, so now they're, it looks like it rained recently, and in fact, I think it might have. There's not many fresh tracks to be seen, so what's fresh. I guess that's a upside to it, but it has been pretty dry, I think, since this summer and until just recently.
Yeah. So you're going to do kind of a guest interview kind of at the beginning of this thing, right? But it's going to be a little extended because you and I have been hunting together some, and we're apart right now, so I'm interested in what you got going on. But you're in Oklahoma, and would you say that in Oklahoma you are still in the rut right now? Or the deer are? Maybe you're always in the rut, Tyler, but what are the deer doing?
Man, it's I just actually just bombed into a spot that's remote and not super far in, but it's just like hard to get to. There's a bunch of beaver sloughs and stuff around, and the grass is super tall, and you're like backtracking, trying not to go. Like, it's too deep here, so you got to cross over there, But I guess what I'm saying is I had this little high spot that had 5 or 6 elm trees in it and 1 cedar, and there was a rub on the cedar pretty high. And then there was several scrapes in there around those elms, and then it crosses this slough and goes into some ag. And I think I saw a fresh track in one of the scrapes. I don't know if there was a fresh track outside of that in any of the scrapes that I looked at, which I only looked at a few really close, probably 3. But then the other 3 or however many I saw, I would look at from 8 foot, 10 foot away or whatever, and just didn't look like anything fresh in there. So, and then the rub also wasn't, for a cedar, it should be pretty orange if it's fresh, and it was more on the brown side. It's wild. Like, I would expect the deer to still be rutting right now here in Oklahoma, but it is not really appearing that way. In fact, I saw the spike come out behind does and did not once act ruddy. And then I saw another buck probably 800 yards away, and he sat and fed in an ag field for the whole evening, 45 minutes probably.
Golly.
And did not one time do anything else, not cruise, not, look up and try to see something. I mean, there was another deer with him over there. I don't know what it was, but he never got frisky with that or anything. So
shoot a monkey, man. Well, it is kind of tough whenever you start encountering stuff like that. And I think that this is something that a lot of people around the country might start seeing, because, 2/3 of the country has a rut that is based around November, right? And that's an arbitrary number I'm throwing out there, but that's kind of where it comes to in my mind. And so a lot of guys focus their efforts on hunting during those times. And then some guys tag out, some guys don't, and then there's guys that are left trying to kind of, pick up the scraps and try to still kill a deer post-rut. But it's like you're dealing with the leftovers of a ton of pressure. So I kind of think that, you're hunting public ground, and that's a thing that could be happening. How does a dude just circumvent, maybe there's not pressure now, but there had been. What do you look for in a situation like that?
Well,
don't give me a sarcastic answer. I can tell it's what you're trying not to do.
Okay, it's thick and it's remote, and those are two places. It's the same things I always look for, though.
Yeah,
are thick and remote, and then also just the overlook spot. So it's the three spots that you always look for. But the problem is you just have to look harder, I think, right now. Mm-hmm. The idea is just to strap the boots on and go after it, man. I mean, and that's what I'm doing. And I'm telling you, last night, I was like, my calves are on the brink of cramping, and I don't cramp very easy, man.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it was just just ridiculous amounts of just, and it's hot. That's another thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty cold this morning. In fact, it was cold enough that, when I tried to separate my sticks, I just ripped my entire, all my skin off. But it was probably 28 this morning. So for us in, I guess the South, Oklahoma, it was cold. But during the day, it's getting up into mid 60s, and, it's hard to go walking 6 miles in an afternoon when it's that hot. You're just going to sweat. You can't carry enough water. So, I don't know. You just gotta be the guy who's meaner than the rest of the people, I guess. And, wants to go out there and try to find something, or, you just use your map, expertise, and, you just say, okay, well, this should work. It's overlooked, whatever. I'm going to give her a shot, which is what I just did. I tried to do, and I found scrapes, and I found a rub, and I found some pretty fresh trails. And I bumped 3 does out of a spot probably 200 yards from the road. So, I mean, it can work. It just, doesn't always.
We tend to be running gunners all the time. I don't really think about it that way. It's just kind of the way we hunt. I'm not I'm a run and gun guy, but I've been thinking about it some the last couple of weeks, and that's kind of how we operate no matter what time of year it is. But I think that that might not always be the best. I think that if it's the heavy rut, then you could be better off just sitting at pinch point for a while and he'll come by, But we tend to not do that. We, if we want to be completely honest, it doesn't make very good video when you just sit in the same spot all the time. And that's one of the things that we move around for. But I always feel like if I ain't moving, I'm not trying hard enough. I need to be trying to figure it out the whole time. And so do you think that right now, kind of in your situation, that moving around is the way to find a deer to get on? Are those bucks drawing back into their core areas, or are they still out on the move roaming?
See, I feel like we're getting back into our early season pattern where rut's not raging. I did see one buck yesterday probably 3/4 of a mile from the road, maybe not quite. And he looked like a decent frame buck, and he just stared into the grass with his ears pinned forward for like 5 minutes. And then he finally like took off with his head down like he was rutting. So I thought yesterday things were different, but now I'm looking at sign and stuff, and I'm actually on the ground. It just looks different. And I based off of sign and what I saw last night and didn't see this morning, it just seems like it's more like an early season pattern. So to me, it feels like you got to bounce if you're not seeing it. Like, I mean, the only time, I don't know, and I might end up hunting the same tree tonight. There's actually probably like nearly a 50% chance that I hunt the same tree tonight that I hunted last night. And you just kind of hope that, a buck is still doing a little bit of stuff where like last night he ended up in a different spot. And so he's going to come out into the wheat, a little bit, or not necessarily into the wheat, but, to the edge of the wheat, in a time that I can get a shot. So that's, I mean, I feel like I have to bounce around. I don't know. What do you think?
I think you probably have to as well, unless you have some weather changes. I think, and we're going to hear from our guests around the country here in a bit about like what the weather, because weather's really big right now. If you have this hot spell, it's tough to kill deer, just straight up. Especially if you're hunting public ground where the mornings are better because it's cooler and you have to walk. Like access is difficult. Like you just feel like you're bumping deer, right? So it's like you're just condemned either direction. And that's pretty tough to stomach really. So maybe a still hunt might be the thing to do. I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing. As far as like what to do right then. It's
hard to self-film. Still hunting though. That's the one thing. I would be on the ground right now calling. I think if we're being honest, like if I'm listening to this right now, I think that's probably more what I would be doing. That's my advice, I guess, is get out there and call, make some racket. I think they still are going to be interested and have been hearing a little bit of that in the last few weeks, and I'm hoping that I can find a way to pull it off out of a tree, because it feels like that's the way to do it right now. I can't film it by myself,
Yeah. I don't know if it was you or Greg or Michael or somebody made the point the other day that they felt like rattling worked better like late rut or post rut because those deer have like heard that quite a bit already. And I never thought about that way. I kind of always thought that they know what rattling is, but they might have to relearn it every year. And there's always like a 3-year-old that I'd probably shoot that probably doesn't know ain't smart enough to know what that is. You know what I mean? So that's a good point, man. I never really thought about
it's like when you go fly fishing and a huge hatch happens and then it goes away and you can still throw a fly down there and they're still familiar with it,
Yeah.
Like a salmon fly hatch or something that moves up the river real quick.
Yeah.
So
got to just catch one in the right mood, man. Yeah.
Well,
so as far as Oklahoma goes, if you wanted to give just a bonus, an auxiliary statement as far as what you think buck movement is going to be like over the next week, what do you think, man?
On a scale of 1 to 2?
Yeah, 1 to 2 or 0 to 1. Good or not?
Oh, man, over the next week. Well, I know what the weather looks like for the rest of the days I got up here. And for my hunt, I'll just talk about that because I don't know what happens after this weekend too much. But I would say we're looking at probably a 3 until we get some really if we can get some pretty harsh weather, I think things could change.
Yeah. And so I had a 3. How confident are you that you're going to come home with a deer?
Oh.
Is that also a 3?
Yeah, it's a -3.
Oh,
actually. No. I feel like, I'm not going to shoot anything. I'm probably going to try to hold out for like, I don't know, a deer with like either a big 8 or like a small 9 or 10, not a small, but like a, medium sized 9 or 10. I don't know. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Like I'm not coming home with a doe. So I felt like when I was coming up here, I felt like I was going to have a really good shot at shooting a deer. And now that I'm here and seeing this stuff, I feel like I really don't have a very good chance of shooting a deer. But this is a particular piece of property it's got a lot of tall grass. I can't see anything. I mean, the first doe I saw last night, I could not see her until she was at 30 yards.
Wow.
So, and and I felt like that I would have been able to see her 150 out there, but I couldn't. So, yeah, it's tough, man. It's tough. But I think, if I'm going to give somebody some hope, is that, the weather is nice enough that, like, it's comfortable to be out here and hunting. It's not, like a chore, especially if you've got, especially if you've got some private, it makes it nice. But I think, like, if I had to, take some time away from the family or whatever, I would probably sit on the next big cold front and be, looking for a bed to food pattern. And I would assume that there's going to be some bucks that are killed on that next big cold front.
Cool, man. Well, hopefully that is in the forecast. I don't know that it is in our soon forecast. I haven't seen one, but, those things can pop up at any time. So we all got something to look forward to until they don't let us go hunting for anymore. So then the season's truly over at that point in time. But anyways, let's actually, this week we're going to hear from our buddy Dudley Phelps, Dud the Stud, down in Mississippi. Tony Peterson has been after the deer in the cold north of Minnesota, and our friend Matt Dye has been hunting and observing over in Missouri. He's got a good report there. And then Jordan Hotchkiss from Timber Ninja is going to round us out in South Carolina. Right here I've got Dudley Phelps with Mossy Oak Gamekeepers, and if you have ever bought anything from Natives Nurseries, he is the guy. His fingerprint is on it. What's going on, dude?
Man, not much. It's always good to hear from you. I've always been a big fan of the Element guys, so glad to hear from you. It's been a while.
Well, thanks, man. Yeah, we exchange text message every once in a while, but I hadn't talked to you on the phone in a good while.
And I've been following y'all. You guys have just had a stellar season, and most importantly, having a lot of fun. Y'all seem to be really good at that part.
Yeah, well, if you ain't having fun, you ain't living, man. So that's what we try to make happen around here. And I know you're the same. And people's fun is different paced a little bit. You've been hunting down in Mississippi, and we were talking beforehand about just kind of how our hunts go and different things. And you very much embrace kind of a more traditional way of hunting, I would say. You kind of do the still hunting thing and walk around and take things in, which you're a very observant guy, so I bet you're pretty good at it.
I'm decent. I fill the freezer.
That's good.
That's my trophy. So
that's cool, man. Well, Mississippi is a southern rut state, right? So we want to talk about some of that stuff a little bit. In general, on the whitetail calendar, where are y'all at there in Mississippi?
I would say we are, early pre-rut. It varies across a lot of the state. The Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks puts out a rut date map that people can check out, like if they're ever coming to visit, and it's spot on. But
That's
around
cool.
here, I would call it early pre-rut. I think most people are going to be shifting their cameras from like feed to scrapes, about now. Scrape activity probably started about a week ago in a lot of places in the state. The bucks are ready, the does are not. So it's not crazy chasing time yet, but we're starting to see more photos in daylight and that early scrape activity. Is kind of what's going on right now.
So right now, your tactic, you were telling me a little bit about earlier, but you're moving a lot, right?
I am. I probably hunt public, 60 or 70% of the time, and I move around a lot there. And then when I hunt private, I kind of do the keeping the pressure low game. But I've been looking for feed trees. We've had a really poor acorn year around here. And I have found a rare species of oak called swamp laurel oaks. They drop their leaves really late. So like I can get on X right now and look at that recent imagery, and I can find little pockets of green trees down in the river bottoms, and that's probably going to be those swamp laurel oaks that are just starting to drop.
That's pretty sharp.
There's no other acorns in the woods right now, so that's kind of been my strategy.
How about that?
I'm still hunting food.
Yeah, well, that's cool, dude. Then that's a high-level tip right there as far as, like, finding the trees that might have leaves on them still, and there's a good chance it's those trees. That's pretty good. So that tree is a lot like a water oak, too, from what I have seen, just what you posted.
They're almost impossible to tell apart.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what differentiates it? Outside of, like,
the leaf is
microscope
just
stuff.
The leaf is just a little bit different. They're tardily deciduous, so the leaves, it's not a true evergreen, but they stay on a lot later than your regular water oak that typically drops acorns in like mid to late October.
Gotcha. And so guys kind of across the South, you can kind of paint a little bit broader stroke and say that those high tannin, water oaks, laurel oaks, willow oaks, those are going to be pretty key things to target on a low acorn year, huh?
Oh yes, they'll gobble them up. They'll walk right past a corn pile to go to acorns, even if they don't taste as good to us.
I guarantee
the deer
you
know that they need them.
I ain't trying to eat those, that's for sure. Well, what do you think is going to be going on in the woods on the upcoming week as far as rut movement goes?
Well, in the areas I hunt, it's probably my favorite time of the year to hunt. It's typically like what we refer to as the second weekend of muzzleloader season in Mississippi. In a lot of areas, that's when you start seeing, chasing beginning. Bucks are going to randomly come out onto a food plot when they normally wouldn't. But it's before the chasing gets just absolutely crazy to where it's almost hard to make a shot on one. But, this next week is where it's going to pick up a good bit in a lot of areas of the state.
Well, that's exciting, man. So if you had to rank what you predict the buck movement to be like on a scale of 1 to 10 in your part of Mississippi there, what would you say it for the next week?
I'd probably say a 6. It's not quite as much movement as we want, but they're not moving so much that it's hard to get a bead on them when they're chasing. If that makes sense. I would almost call it a searching phase, and the younger deer are chasing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That makes good sense.
Not quite full on, but it's easier to get them in the scope or get them in the crosshairs.
Yeah, that's cool, Dudley. We appreciate the information, man, and I hope you have a great rest of the season.
Well, y'all do the same, and I'll look forward to seeing more from you guys.
Now I've got my friend Tony Peterson, who is a deer slayer. If y'all didn't know, I'm sure you do. He's with Meat Eater. What's happening, Tony?
Not much, man. I don't feel like a real deer slayer lately. I feel like a deer looker for kind of guy.
Isn't that weird how it goes? Like you and I were just talking beforehand. We both had very nice seasons where we killed some deer, but it's like it's the what have you done for me lately thing. You go 2 weeks without having a good encounter, and you're like, man, I'm terrible at this, right?
Yeah. Dude, I've been dividing my time between some public land in western Minnesota and some private land here by my house in eastern Minnesota. I can't even see a deer here on the east side, and the ones I see on the west side are in 8-foot-tall cattails. So I'm like, it's almost like I'm hunting ghosts right now.
Well, that's probably what the problem is. They probably put on Mark's white sheet, and they look like ghosts out there running around and just camouflaging in the snow, and they're hard to find. If deer ever figure out that trick, we're toast. At least you are.
They don't need to. I mean, the deer that I've been hunting in those cattail sloughs, it's like we've had a dry year, so there was a real growth in those cattails. And when I walk in there to pheasant hunt, some of those spots, they're like 10 feet tall. And so even where the growth wasn't that great, if you put a deer in there, I mean, you could hide an elk in there, let alone a whitetail. And so it's like they're it's almost like they're underground. It's like it doesn't do you any good till they step out, How are you finding like specific either deer or areas to target? Well, the good thing about that, you guys know this, is those areas you can observe pretty well. And so, I mean, you lose them when they get into the cover, but you can kind of predict a pattern. And the cool thing about it is you get an aerial view of those cattail sloughs. They look kind of like monohabitat, but then you see a little patch of willows in there or a little vein of Phragmites, which is that tall invasive grass. And those bucks follow that stuff. It's unbelievable. I in fact, 2 weeks ago, we had a little bit of fresh snow when I was down, and I started tracking just tracks in the slough. And I got on 7 different sets of tracks and jumped 7 deer out of their beds, including 3 bucks close, within like 20, 30 yards. And following a buck track through there was like a education that was just amazing to me. How they stick to those lines of cover and how they travel with the wind in there and everything and where they bed. It's so cool. They have so many advantages and they know how to use them.
Yeah. So you were, I guess it sounds like you were kind of doing the old just track them up and try to shoot them thing, huh?
Well, I did that because I had posted up for 3 sits and had some really close opportunities, or I should say they could have broke my way. They just didn't. And then when I was leaving, cause it's a couple hours to get out there for me. When I was leaving one morning, I had blanked and I knew those deer made it back into the cattails and they didn't go by me. And so I just happened to have a lucky set of circumstances where there was fresh snow and I started getting on the tracks, and man, it was like the most fun I've had all season, even though I knew the odds of getting a good shot were real low. But man, when you can follow how a deer walked into a cattail slough, the route he took to get to his bed and then see where his bed is and when he was in it, it was cool, man.
Yeah. Man, when I think of cold weather, I think of trying to hunt deer that are actively headed to food sources because they just got to eat when they get cold, right? Is that something you're targeting, or is there just food everywhere in that country?
There's enough food, but the pressure is everything. The day before I did that little tracking festival, I saw 14 deer go into that cattail slough in the morning, and I saw 20 hunters on that property throughout the day.
Wow.
So their whole thing is they've got 9 hours of daylight or whatever, however much daylight we have, they go lay low, and then they have all night to feed and not get harassed. And so the deer I'm hunting anyway, it's all tied to pressure.
Gotcha.
You can kind of predict and go, oh, they're going to go to that cut cornfield or whatever, but they're not going to get anywhere near that until dark.
Yeah. Well, it seems like, at least looking at kind of the weather forecast for your area up there, you have very, very consistent days ahead. Like even there's like one day in the 50s, but it's really like 40s and 30s and lows that are all pretty similar. So with that, like just looming on the horizon, there's no fronts to kind of hunt. What do you think is going to be going on over the next week?
I don't think it's going to be very easy.
Yeah.
We are unseasonably warm here. And, we got a little bit of snow this morning that'll be gone. And, this happens like once every, 5 or 10 years where I'll be bow hunting like Christmas Day or Christmas Eve and there'll be no snow. And, other years we'll have snow that starts in the beginning of November. And so they're not stressed. Like this is a great winter so far to get them like recovered from the rut and not have a big die off in the winter. But it makes it a heck of a lot harder because they don't have to work that hard right now, and they're not going to risk it.
Yeah, I don't blame them, man. It can't be too risky up here in the North Country. So if you had to give the next week a rating on the scale of 1 to 10 for buck movement, what would you think it would be?
Man, I'll give it a 3, but I'll qualify it by saying you should still hunt anyway.
I like it. The optimism is good, man. That's what you got to have. I mean, if you're looking at a 3, you got to be optimistic. So that's good stuff, man. Tony, I really appreciate it, dude. I hope you find one more big one.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy.
I've got my brother Matt Dye on the phone. He is with Land & Legacy, and you might have seen him on TV with a show called HuntWorks. Matt, what's happening, man?
Not much, dude. Just rolling through season and trying to keep my head above water with work and everything like that. But that's just the norm. Yeah. What's going on in your world?
Well, right now I'm watching 2 roadrunners posture to one another, which is a pretty fun thing. Oh, there's 3. He's chasing a grasshopper. It's going down around here. That's where the which he's running under my car right now. Goodness gracious. Okay, back to deer. Sorry, I get distracted. Yeah. I'm just home from a hunt, man, and trying to figure out what's going on around the country. You're in Missouri, and you've got kind of a interesting take as to what's been happening in the woods lately, right?
Yes, it's such an interesting time of this season for us. Missouri's got a rifle season that is short and sweet, an 11-day season, but it hits right in the smack dab middle of the rut, and there is an incredible amount of pressure that happens during that time frame. I think this year's totals were somewhere around 170,000 deer that were harvested in the state in that 11-day period.
Wow!
And so there is just an incredible amount of just all of a sudden just random pressure that just hits the deer woods. And at that same time frame, deer are most active. And so as you rebound after the following few weeks, you've got the post rut that happens, and then now we're kind of in this weird tweener stage of there's a little bit of rutting activity. There's a whole lot of deer that just feel like they're almost coming out of the holes in the ground after all of that pressure. And that's kind of that scenario we're finding ourselves in right now, from both in the field observations as well as trail camera observations. It's like, who made it through, and is there any pattern to what you're doing right now? Mm-hmm. It's kind of the mindset.
And so right now you're fixing to go out on an evening hunt because you have been kind of following trail camera data, right?
Yes. So, the bed to food pattern is really beginning to take its place after that post rut activity has really started to subside. Bucks are still hitting scrapes and checking those on the way out to some of the larger food sources, which is great place, obviously, from the camera to get kind of an inventory of what's happening. But started to see quite a few of the bucks from kind of the pre-rut, early November swing starting to settle back into kind of that evening pattern of bed to food, which is great. And to see inventory-wise who actually just made it. So that's kind of what the tactic is for right now. We've actually got a pretty cold day here for us today. Then we kind of get in this little warming trend for the next 4 or 5 days. But we've got high pressure, northwest wind, and it's going to kind of push some deer to feed. And a lot of this is honestly clover in a large, secluded hayfield. And so it's not like it's a big crop field or anything like that in my region that we're hunting, but some recent temperatures, some recent rain, the clover's popped, and the deer are heading to it for sure.
Yeah, so I'm going to give you an opportunity to just showcase your skills, man, because land management is your business. It's what you do, and you're really good at it, and you approach it from such a unique, holistic approach, and I really appreciate it. So I would imagine that your properties that you get to hunt, you do your best, at least, within your limitations, to be able to kind of make them places that deer would like to be, right? And that clover, I'm
Sure.
guessing, is a big part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And for us being in the southern half of Missouri, sir, we absolutely get cold. But a lot of people overlook clover and a good standard perennial white clover into late season. But if you get these warming trends and there's moisture, whether it's from frost or whatever, that clover is going to liven back up. And as soon as that happens, deer respond to it. And that could be winter wheat in your area, but just for us and our general resources in this landscape, that's kind of what we key into. Now, if we have a big bumper crop of red oak acorns, we're also going to key into that at this time of the year if there's any more left over. But between clover that starts to pop back, as well as the red oaks, then man, we're definitely keen to that from a food source standpoint. 2 weeks from now, I'll be in western Iowa, kind of northwestern Iowa, and it's completely different. We're hunting standing grain, standing soybeans on a couple different farms, and that's the game there. But for us in this region, you got to hunt the resources that they're after. And for us right now, weather, temperatures, they're hitting clover.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Makes a lot of sense, man. And so if we look at that warming trend you're talking about, it's kind of a thing, at least here in the South and the Midwest. It's just what we're looking at. And it makes it for kind of, I don't know, what you feel like might be stagnant deer activity, but there's always a move, right? There's always something to do. So if you looked at kind of our weather and the time of year, and you have to give it a rating on a scale of 1 to 10 of what you think buck movement will be like over the next week, what would you rate it?
I'm gonna go with a 5.
Okay.
For 2 reasons, which is about just as plain Jane as possible. so the reason I give it like, hey, there's some chance there is because of just the biology of the animal. Like, they're coming out of the rut where they've expended a ton of energy, so they're going to hit food sources for sure. If you get a high pressure day, despite temperatures being maybe a touch warm or something, they're probably going to move within daylight. So there's some decent chances that you might get a swing or a crack at a buck. Mm-hmm. But if not, if it just gets warm and you don't have, decent wind or that pressure situation, then you could be sitting there twiddling your thumbs and see a bunch of fawns and does and not your target till after dark, right?
Yep.
So it's really that hit or miss. And I'd say that for just the time of the year itself. I'm really going to start keying into as we get to mid-December. Okay, are any fawns coming into heat? Any fawns coming into estrus? But then also, when are we going to get those 2 to 3 day cold snaps that just kind of set in here? I want to hunt the front of it, but I want to hunt the back end of it. But for us, the next couple of days, it's pretty stagnant. So I'm going to give it a 5.
Hey, man, 5's better than 0. That's for sure. Matt, appreciate it, dude. Thanks so much for the report.
No problem, man.
Jordan Hotchkiss is here. He's been hunting in North Carolina, probably out of a timber ninja if I had to imagine. Jordan, what's happening, man?
Just getting after it. How about you, buddy?
Hey, about the same. Actually, I'm in a little bit of a lull here. I've been on the road for a good portion of the month of November, and I've got 5 or 6 days here at the house to just soak up some family time, and it's actually well appreciated. It's a good time of year to do that. Weather's still nice and all, So, what's it like in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, about the same, man. I got 3 little kids, so if I'm not working or spending time with the family, I'm trying to be in the woods as much as I can. But right now is a little bit of a lull out there, so it's a good time to try to get it in while I can before I hit it hard the last 3 weeks of season.
I got you. So, can you explain that? We were talking a little bit off air about the lull that we're all kind of experiencing right now, but in your part of the country there in North Carolina, how does the rut lay out usually?
Yeah, so I'm in the Appalachian Mountains in western North Carolina. As I mentioned earlier, it's very sporadic, really. I mean, that first week in November could be hit or miss depending on really what holler you're in. But usually we'll have an uptick there around Thanksgiving. This year, Thanksgiving was really good. A lot of bucks hit the ground, some real good cruising activity. And then right now it's starting to die off. They're hard on food right now. And then I'd say next week it'll start ramping up a little bit, but those last 2 weeks of season is really one of the best times for rut activity. It seems like those yearling does finally come into heat, and those bucks just really get back on the move trying to catch those young does.
Gotcha. And North Carolina, as far as latitude goes, it's pretty far north, but it's still like what I would consider the South, especially. We have similar accents, and then also, the climate there is probably going to be more like that, right?
Yes, I'm not exactly sure about what your climate is, but I mean it's in the 30s here in the mornings. Yeah. Next week's home from the 20s, and then highs probably 40s, 50s, things like that.
Okay, gotcha. A little cooler than I expected. Are y'all? Do you experience the fronts that kind of come in from the Rockies, or I know that East Coast stuff, you get a little bit different weather patterns over there?
Yeah, and we do. I mean, we get some pretty good fronts, but it just depends on how it hits these mountains. But yeah, I mean, we can get some single digit temps. I mean, the other morning I went hunting, it was 11 degrees.
Wow.
But then we could get a heat spike and it'll be 70 in December. So kind of up and down, but in the mountains here it does get pretty cold.
Yeah. What have you been doing here? As this lull approaches, like what's your tactic you're going to try to kill a big buck?
Still focusing on, travel corridors, saddles ahead of hollers. things like that, because you still have some roamers. But right now, like we talked about earlier, I'm kind of just taking some time to spend time with the family, and then I'll hit it hard the next 3 weeks. And really that later season is kind of an oddity as well. I don't know if you experience this, but it's like, the does they're starting to get hard on food because it's late, it's getting cold, and some of the bucks are on food, but at the same time, they're checking those food sources for does coming in heat. I mean, I killed a 7-year-old buck last year on December 17th.
Wow.
Before I saw him, I was watching a 2-year-old 10-point run a doe for an hour. So it's really sporadic, but I think it's one of the best times to hunt, honestly.
Oh, that's great December action. Are you still having acorns in December, or are those all dried up for you?
No, man, this year we had a bumper crop this year.
Really?
It's made it tough hunting. Honestly, there's just every acorn tree has been loaded, at least where we're at. So there definitely are still some acorns on the ground. I have a lot of buddies that, that feed corn and stuff, and they told me that they're not even getting pictures on their corn because there's just so many acorns. But
so as we look forward to the next week here, are you going to continue on just hunting those pinch points, or are you going to get more aggressive with any calling or any of that kind of stuff?
I'll hunt pinch points, but then also try to hone in on some of those food sources, because while we did have a bumper crop, it's now starting to get to where there's definitely some spots that are going to be hotter. They cleaned up, I think, a lot of those acorns, through now, but trying to find those late season spots where they haven't got them all cleaned up, mainly red oaks. Just finding those areas and then finding those close to, cruising spots, saddles, and like I said, the head of drainages, things like that.
Shoot, man, it sounds like things are far from over in your neck of the woods. It's pretty exciting that you can still hunt good action in December.
It is, man. It works out good for my schedule because, having 3 young kids, I don't really get to go on that many trips. I usually do either an elk hunt or a rut hunt, and I try to hit that Midwest time frame out of state, the first 2 weeks of November. And then it's like, if I'm not successful, I still have the latter season here to look forward to, because that's when it's best, in my opinion.
Yeah, man. That's a great way to look at it for sure. If you had to look at the next week, I know you kind of already gave us a little anticipation here, but the next week, if you had to rank buck movement on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you call it?
I would say a 5.
That's a good number.
Yeah, I mean, middle of the road. I think it just depends on where you're at, but I'm starting to get a few more pictures during the day of bucks moving, that 9, 10 o'clock range, it seems like, more than anything. But I think it's still a little lullish. I think you still have some mature deer that are on does, locked down. But I think it's just going to get better. But next week, probably about a 5, I'd say.
Man, that's cool, dude. A 5's way better than a 0, so
that's right.
That's a good time to be in the woods. I appreciate the info, man. Thank you.
Absolutely.
There is still a lot of reason for deer hunters around the country to be optimistic. Thank you for tuning in to Rut Fresh Radio this week, guys. I hope the information that we got from all our contributors helps you make a good decision this week to get out there and get after the deer. If you need some more content, you need some more stuff to check out, some things, some inspiration, whatever it may be, you might go check out the Wired to Hunt feed, because Mark, as you remember, we alluded to earlier, he in fact killed the wide 9, and he has a podcast about how that went down. And then also Tony Peterson, a guest on today's show, asks the question, how many deer are there really, on the latest Foundations episode. Also, check out the description below, because there are some cool videos from the Element crew that just went out on the Meat Eater feed that you for sure need to take a look at. Some big pigs go down, and also Tyler shot a really nice buck in South Dakota. I hope you all have a great rest of your season. We still have more rut action around the country to tune into, so tune in next week for another episode of Rut Fresh Radio. This has been Rut Fresh. Keep it fresh.